Okay, on this handout, beside each one of the terms there at the top, I want you to write out just a brief definition of which each one of these mean before we get started down at the bottom. So popular sovereignty just basically means that people are the source of power in our government. So when we look at the Constitution, we the people. Um, so popular sovereignty, the sovereignty, where does the power lie? The ultimate authority and power in our government comes from the people. Limited government. We're just talking about the fact that we have lots and lots of systems in place that limit the power of the government. When we start looking at the Constitution, we're going to see that that when the founding fathers wrote this document, it was intended to be just a very, very small list of things that the government can do. There's several places in the Constitution that gives lists of things that our governments cannot do. When we look at the Bill of Rights and the amendments, we're looking at protections that are put in place to limit the powers of government. Separation of powers, 3 branches of government having their own powers. Legislative makes laws, executive enforces laws, judicial interprets the laws. Then we have checks and balances, which says the president has to sign a law, which is a check on the legislative branch. Then the legislative branch can override that veto, which is a check on the president. The president gets to appoint ambassadors and judges and members of cabinets and different officials, but the Senate has to confirm them. The president can negotiate treaties, but the Senate has to confirm them. And then you have the judicial branch, and this is down letter E, you kind of skip to that. The judicial branch's main check is judicial review, but then Congress has, let's do the president. The president is the one who picks judges, and Congress has to confirm those judges, and Congress gets to determine how many judges are on the court. And so all of these multiple steps, no one branch can do anything, so they check each other, and that balances the power of the 3 branches of government. Judicial review, just went over that. The power of the courts to determine whether acts of government are constitutional or not. And then federalism, we have that division of power between state and national government. And the 10th Amendment says those powers that are not delegated to the national government are reserved for the states. Well, it's not delegated and then denied to them. So if it's not in Article 1, Section 8, and if it's not in Article 1, Section 10, then the government, the states are allowed to make laws for themselves. So the people are the source of power, and you should underline the people are the source of power. That is popular sovereignty. The president is responsible for executing, enforcing, and administering the law. We're looking at one branch of government and what their power is. So we have separated the power and given that specific power to the president, separation of power. A 2/3 vote in each House of Congress is needed to override a veto. The president is the one who vetoes. So when you see 2 branches of government having to do something, they put that in place to have checks on each branch to balance the power so no one branch becomes too powerful. So that is checks and balances. The practice is established in Marbury versus Madison. That's the first case where the judicial branch rules something unconstitutional, giving them the power to do that. So that is judicial review. Congress shall make no law. We're putting in the Constitution different places, including the Bill of Rights, things that the government cannot do. So we're limiting the government's power, limited government. Educational requirements vary from state to state. This is federalism. We've got that division of power where the national government does certain things, everything else is left up to the states. So that is federalism. Only Congress has the power to declare war. We're looking at a branch of government and saying this is a power that they have. We're looking at one branch here. So that's separation of powers. Presidential appointees are subject to approval by the Senate. Once again, we're having 2 branches here. One has to check the other one to keep them from getting too powerful. We have checks and balances. We the people, popular sovereignty. The people are the source of the power in the government. Rule of law. We know that no one in government is above the law. Everyone is subject to the laws, even the president. So this is limiting the powers of the government. Congress can't do anything it wants to. It is subject to the laws. Members of the courts are subject to the laws. President is subject to the laws. Pennsylvania, as soon as you see that, you should know that, okay, we're giving certain powers to the states. So federalism. In Pennsylvania, citizens pay both a state and a federal income tax because we have that division of power. Government may exercise only those powers delegated to it. So we're telling the government, you are not all powerful. You are limited because you can only do these specific things that we have outlined in the Constitution, limited government. Federal courts may declare illegal any government action violating the Constitution. And once again, that's almost the very definition of judicial review. Government can govern only with the consent of the governed. That is the people. The people are the source of power, and the government gets its power from us. We are the boss, popular sovereignty. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. Once again, we're just looking at one branch of government and the specific powers that are given to it. So that is separation of powers. All treaties made by the President must be ratified by the Senate. The Senate has to check the President's treaties, and if they do not ratify them, then they do not go into effect. So we have checks, which balances the power, checks and balances. The Supreme Court has voided nearly 1,000 state laws as unconstitutional. Once again, that's their judicial review power. And powers not specifically given to the federal government by the Constitution are retained by the states, that division of power between state and national government. So these are the very, very important principles. And I know that it can be tricky because when you look at all of these combined, what does federalism do? It limits the government's power. What does judicial review do? It limits the government's powers. Checks and balances, to limit the powers. Separation of powers, to limit the powers. Popular sovereignty, limiting the government. So all of these combined do limit the government's powers, but each one of them has its own definition, and they are clearly given as examples here for you to understand.